The signal came from nowhere. It traveled through the empty darkness of space for weeks before reaching Earth. Lisa Grant was working her normal shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station when her computers started making unusual sounds. She sat up straight in her chair and looked at her screen. Something was coming through on a frequency that humans had never used before. The computer began translating the message automatically. Lisa felt her heart beat faster as the words appeared on her screen. The message was simple but terrible. Someone out there needed help. They were dying. Their worlds were burning. An enemy called the Krell Swarm was destroying everything they had. The message was from something called the Valorian Coalition, and they were begging anyone who could hear them to please send help. Lisa immediately called her boss, Commander Jack Morrison. He came to her station and listened to the message 3 times. His face became more serious with each repetition. Other workers in the station gathered around to listen. Nobody spoke. They all understood what this meant. Somewhere far away, an entire civilization was being wiped out. Jack asked how far away the signal was coming from. Lieutenant Kevin Shaw checked his navigation systems and said it was about 47 light-years away in a region they called Sector Gamma 9. The signal was weak and breaking up, which meant it had been sent weeks ago. Maybe even months. Jack asked if they could send a message back. Lisa said they could try, but there was no way to know if the aliens would receive it in time. Within a few hours, the message had reached every important person on Earth. President Helen Carter called an emergency meeting. Military leaders, scientists, and government officials all gathered in a huge room with holographic displays floating in the air. The displays showed maps of space, trying to locate where the Valorian Coalition might be and where this Krell Swarm was coming from. General Paul Bennett was an old soldier with gray hair and many years of experience. He asked the obvious question: did anyone know who these Valorians were? Had Earth ever had contact with them before? Dr. Alan Pierce was the head of xenobiology research, which meant he studied alien life. He stepped forward and explained that Earth had never encountered the Valorians before. But based on the technology needed to send a message across such a huge distance, they were clearly very advanced, more advanced than humans in many ways. Someone asked about the Krell. Dr. Pierce shook his head. Nobody knew anything about them. But if the Valorians were desperate enough to send a message into the void hoping anyone would hear it, then the threat must be extremely serious. The Valorians were clearly losing badly. The room became very quiet. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. Humanity had only recently figured out how to travel faster than light. They had met a few alien species, and all of them had been peaceful. The galaxy had seemed like a safe place, mostly empty and calm. This message changed everything. There were dangerous things out there, things that destroyed entire civilizations. Secretary of Defense Claire Hudson spoke up. She said that if Earth ignored this message, they would be telling the galaxy that humans did not help those in need. They would be saying that Earth was selfish and cowardly, but if they responded, they would be getting involved in a war they knew nothing about. They could lose ships. They could lose lives. They might even make an enemy that would come after Earth next. President Carter stood up. She was a tall woman with steady eyes. She had already made her decision. She said that humanity did not reach for the stars just to hide when someone needed help. If Earth wanted to be part of the galactic community, they had to act like it. They had to show that humans stood up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. She ordered the military to prepare the Titan's Wrath, Earth's largest and most powerful warship. They were going to help the Valorians. The news spread across Earth within hours. People had mixed feelings. Some were proud that Earth was going to help. Others were scared that humanity was getting involved in something too big, too dangerous. But the decision was made. The Titan's Wrath would launch within 3 days. The ship was already in orbit above Earth. It was massive, 3 kilometers long, covered in weapons and armor. It had taken 10 years to build and represented the best technology humanity had ever created. 2,000 crew members began preparing for the mission. They loaded supplies, checked weapon systems, and ran through every possible scenario they could imagine. Captain Ryan Foster was chosen to command the mission. He was a veteran who had fought in several conflicts in the solar system. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion when colonists tried to break away from Earth. He had commanded ships during the Jupiter mining conflicts when corporations went to war over resources. But this was different. This was not humans fighting humans. This was humanity stepping onto a stage where they might be small and weak compared to others. Ryan stood on the bridge of the Titan's Wrath and looked down at Earth through the large windows. He wondered if he would see his home planet again. He wondered if his ship and crew were enough to make a difference. 2,000 humans against an enemy that was destroying an advanced alien civilization. The odds seemed impossible. But Ryan had learned something during his years of military service. Sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. Sometimes you had to act even when success seemed unlikely, because if you did not try, you had already failed. He turned to his crew and gave the order. They were going to Sector Gamma 9. They were going to find the Valorians, and they were going to fight the Krell swarm, whatever it was. Earth was sending help, and the Titan's Wrath would not fail. The engines began to warm up. The crew took their positions, and somewhere 47 light-years away, the Valorians continued to fight and die, not knowing that help was finally coming. Not knowing that a species they had never heard of had decided to risk everything to save them. The Titan's Wrath prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. The mission had begun. The Titan's Wrath floated in space like a giant metal island. From a distance it looked peaceful, but up close anyone could see it was built for war. Weapons covered every surface. Missile tubes, railguns, plasma cannons, and laser batteries pointed in all directions. The hull was made of composite armor that could withstand impacts from asteroids and enemy fire. Inside, 2,000 men and women worked at their stations, preparing for a journey into the unknown. Captain Ryan Foster walked through the corridors, checking on different sections of the ship. He visited the engine room where massive reactors hummed with power. He stopped by the medical bay where doctors prepared emergency equipment. He went to the armory where Marines checked their weapons and combat suits. Everywhere he went, he saw the same thing on people's faces. Determination mixed with fear. They all knew this mission was dangerous. They all knew they might not come back. Lieutenant Commander Nicole Barnes was the second in command. She was a skilled officer who had served with Ryan for 5 years. She trusted him completely, and he trusted her. When Ryan returned to the bridge, Nicole was already there, reviewing the final checks from every department. She looked up and nodded. Everything was ready. Ryan sat in the captain's chair and looked at the main view screen. Earth filled half the screen, blue and green and beautiful. He had been born down there in a small town in the Midwest. He had left home when he was 18 to join the military. He had seen Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. He had fought battles in asteroid fields and on the moons of distant planets. But he had never left the solar system. Nobody on the Titan's Wrath had. This would be a first for all of them. He gave the order to begin. Helmsman Eric Cole, a young officer with quick hands and sharp eyes, entered the coordinates into the navigation system. The ship's computer calculated the jump path. It would take them through a dimension called hyperspace, where the normal rules of physics did not apply. They would travel 47 light-years in about 6 days. It was amazing technology, but also dangerous. One small error in the calculations could send them into a star, or leave them stranded in empty space forever. The engines built up power. Everyone felt a strange vibration through the floor. Then space itself seemed to bend and twist around the ship. The stars stretched into long lines. Earth disappeared, and the Titan's Wrath entered hyperspace. The journey gave the crew time to prepare and think. In the Marine section, Major Danny Walsh gathered his soldiers. There were 500 Marines on board, all trained for combat in space on planets and inside ships. Danny was a tough man with scars on his face from old battles. He had fought hand-to-hand with enemies and survived situations that would have killed most people. But even he felt nervous about this mission. He told his Marines to prepare for anything. They did not know what the Krell looked like. They did not know how they fought. The only information they had was that the Krell attacked in swarms and overwhelmed enemies with numbers. Danny ordered his troops to practice close-quarters combat, to check their armor seals, and to make sure their weapons had full ammunition. If the Krell tried to board the Titan's Wrath, the Marines would be the last line of defense. In the science laboratory, Dr. Karen Phillips studied the Valorian message over and over. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in alien life forms. She had met 3 different alien species before, all of them peaceful and willing to talk. But the Krell sounded different. The Valorians used words like consume and swarm and no mercy. That suggested the Krell might not be interested in communication or negotiation. They might be more like insects or animals, driven by instinct rather than reason. Karen worked with her assistant, Lieutenant Greg Sanders, to develop theories about the Krell. If they were like a swarm, they probably had some kind of hive mind or central control. If they consumed resources, they might be harvesting planets for materials or food. If they showed no mercy, they might not understand concepts like surrender or peace. Every theory was frightening in its own way. Karen sent a report to Captain Ryan. In it, she warned that the Krell might represent a threat not just to the Valorians, but to Earth as well. If the Krell were expanding through space, consuming everything in their path, they might eventually reach human territory. This mission was not just about saving aliens. It was about protecting humanity's future. The days passed slowly. The crew settled into routines. People ate meals together in the cafeteria, talking quietly about what they might find. Some played cards or watched movies to pass the time. Others exercised or slept. Everyone dealt with the stress in their own way. Ryan spent most of his time on the bridge reviewing tactical plans. Nicole helped him develop strategies for different scenarios. What if the Krell had better weapons? What if there were too many of them? What if the Valorians were already dead by the time they arrived? They tried to plan for every possibility, knowing that reality would probably surprise them anyway. On the 6th day, the ship's computer announced they were approaching the destination. Eric began the process of dropping out of hyperspace. Everyone on the bridge held their breath. The strange vibration returned. The stretched stars began to snap back into points of light. And then they were there in normal space again at the edge of the Valorian system. What they saw made everyone go silent. 3 planets were burning. Actual fires covered their surfaces, visible even from millions of kilometers away. Debris floated everywhere, the remains of destroyed space stations and defensive platforms. And filling the space between the planets was a cloud of small ships, thousands upon thousands of them, moving together like a school of fish or a flock of birds. The Krell swarm had arrived before them. Nicole whispered something under her breath. Ryan could not hear what she said, but he understood the feeling. They had all expected a battle, but nobody had expected this. The Valorian system looked like it had been through hell, and the enemy was still there, still destroying, still consuming. Ryan took a deep breath and straightened in his chair. The Titan's wrath had come to help, and that was exactly what they were going to do, no matter how impossible it looked. The bridge crew stared at the view screen in shock. The Krell swarm covered the space ahead like a living cloud. Each individual ship was small, maybe 50 meters long, with a strange organic appearance. They did not look like metal machines. They looked more like insects or deep-sea creatures with curved shells and multiple appendages. But there were so many of them. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Lieutenant Amy Chen worked at the sensor station. Her job was to scan everything around the ship and identify threats. Her voice shook slightly as she reported what she was finding. There were Krell ships everywhere, concentrated around the 3 burning planets. The sensors also detected life signs on the 4th planet in the system. That must be where the surviving Valorians were hiding. But the Krell were moving toward that planet too. Ryan asked for exact numbers. Amy checked her readings twice before answering. 17,000 individual Krell ships. She said it quietly, like speaking the number too loud would make it worse. 17,000 enemy ships against 1 human vessel. Ryan felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his face calm. The crew was watching him. They needed to see confidence, not fear. He ordered Communications Officer Lisa Grant to contact the Valorians on all possible frequencies. Lisa worked quickly, sending out messages in every format the ship's computer could generate. For a long minute, there was no response. Then a face appeared on the view screen. The alien looked almost human, but not quite. His face was longer and thinner than a human face. His skin had a strange quality, like it was glowing from within. The glow changed colors, shifting from blue to purple to green. Ryan guessed the colors meant something, like emotions or thoughts. The alien wore what looked like a military uniform, torn and dirty. The alien identified himself as Commander Thelvar of the Valorian Defense Fleet. He said, "What remains of it," in a tired voice that carried centuries of sadness. He asked if the human ship had received their distress message. Ryan confirmed they had. The Titan's wrath was here to help. Thelvar's skin changed colors rapidly, flickering between shades. Ryan guessed it was surprise mixed with disbelief. The alien looked at something off-screen, then back at Ryan. He asked a simple question. One ship? One ship against the entire swarm? He said the humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Ryan allowed himself a small smile. He said maybe they were both. Then he asked for tactical information. What was the current situation? How many Valorians were left? What were the Krell doing? Thelvar transmitted data files to the Titan's Wrath. The ship's computers processed the information and displayed it on screens around the bridge. The story was grim. The Krell had arrived 6 months ago without warning. They had overwhelmed the Valorian defense fleet through pure numbers. Valorian ships were more advanced and more powerful than Krell ships, but it did not matter. For every Krell ship destroyed, 10 more took its place. The Krell did not negotiate. They did not communicate. They simply attacked and consumed. They harvested metals from planetary surfaces. They collected biomatter, which meant living things. They even drained atmospheres from planets, taking the air itself. Every world they touched became a dead rock floating in space. The Valorians had about 2 million survivors left. They were hiding in underground facilities on Valoria Prime, the 4th planet. But the defenses were failing. The Krell adapted to Valorian weapons within hours of encountering them. Energy shields that worked yesterday were useless today. Weapons that killed Krell ships last week now barely damaged them. Thelvar estimated they had maybe 1 week left before the Krell broke through and killed everyone. Ryan listened to all of this without speaking. When Thelvar finished, Ryan made a decision. He told the Valorian commander to keep his people safe in their shelters. The Titan's Wrath was about to show the Krell what happened when they threatened innocent lives. Thelvar's skin turned deep blue, which the translation computer said meant doubt or concern. The alien warned that the Krell had destroyed civilizations older and more powerful than humanity. Many species had tried to stop the swarm. All of them had failed. Ryan ended the transmission and turned to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Carl Brooks. Carl was a big man with steady hands and a calm personality. He had been firing ship weapons for 15 years and could hit targets most people could not even see. Ryan told him to find the biggest concentration of Krell ships and prepare to fire everything they had. Carl's fingers moved across his control panel. Targeting systems locked onto a cluster of about 500 Krell ships that were tearing apart an old Valorian space station. Carl reported ready to fire. Ryan gave one simple order. Fire. The Titan's Wrath unleashed its weapons all at once. Railguns fired tungsten rounds at incredible speeds. Each round hit with the force of a nuclear bomb. Plasma cannons shot beams of superheated matter that could cut through anything. Missile batteries launched dozens of guided warheads that tracked individual targets. The space around the ship lit up like a second sun. 300 Krell ships disappeared in the first 5 seconds. They simply ceased to exist, torn apart by human weapons. For a moment, the rest of the swarm seemed to pause, as if they could not believe what had just happened. Then they reacted. Like an angry hive of bees, thousands of Krell ships turned toward the Titan's Wrath. They began moving in coordinated patterns, surrounding the human ship from all directions. They were coming to destroy this new threat. Ryan watched them approach on the view screen. He felt his heart pounding, but kept his voice steady. He ordered evasive maneuvers and told all defensive systems to activate. The battle had begun. On Valoria Prime, deep underground, millions of Valorian survivors watched on whatever screens they had. They saw one ship alone against the swarm. They saw it fire and saw Krell ships die. And for the first time in 6 months, they felt something they thought they had lost forever. Hope. The Krell swarm hit the Titan's Wrath like a tsunami. Thousands of small ships came from every direction, firing biological weapons that Ryan had never seen before. Some fired acid that ate through metal. Others launched living missiles that tried to attach to the hull and burrow inside. A few shot energy beams that seemed to drain power directly from the ship's systems. The Titan's Wrath fought back with everything it had. Automated defense turrets tracked and destroyed incoming targets. The ship twisted and turned with surprising grace for something so large. Eric, the helmsman, flew the massive vessel like a fighter pilot, dodging clusters of enemies and positioning the ship for the best firing angles. Carl worked his weapons with focused intensity. He fired the railguns in controlled bursts, making every shot count. The plasma cannons carved lines of destruction through Krell formations. Missiles streaked away from the ship, each one finding a target. Krell ships exploded by the dozens, then by the hundreds. But more kept coming. Lieutenant Sam Porter worked in the engineering section deep inside the ship. His job was to keep all systems running no matter what happened. He watched his screens with growing concern. The shields were taking heavy damage. The acid from Krell weapons was eating through the energy fields faster than normal weapons would. He reported to the bridge that shields were down to 85% and falling. Ryan processed the information quickly. They could not win a long battle. The Krell had too many ships. The Titan's wrath would eventually run out of ammunition or power or both. They needed a different strategy. Dr. Karen Phillips called from the science lab. She had been analyzing the Krell ship movements during the battle. She noticed patterns. The Krell were not just attacking randomly. They moved in coordinated groups like soldiers following orders, and each group seemed to center around one larger ship. She counted 17 of these larger ships spread throughout the system. Ryan understood immediately. The Krell had command ships, leaders. If those ships died, the smaller ships might lose coordination. It was a theory, but it was the best idea they had. He ordered Eric to plot a course to the nearest large Krell ship. They were going hunting. The Titan's wrath turned and accelerated, pushing through Krell formations with concentrated fire. Smaller enemy ships bounced off the shields or were destroyed by point defense weapons. The ship carved a path through the swarm like a knife through water. The command ship ahead was bigger than the others, maybe twice the size, with a bloated appearance like a queen insect. It was surrounded by hundreds of smaller ships acting as guards. Ryan ordered Carl to prepare the Ragnarok cannons. The Ragnarok cannons were the most powerful weapons on the ship. They were massive energy projectors that took 5 minutes to charge. They could only fire twice before needing a long cooldown period. Ryan had been saving them for exactly this moment. Carl began the charging sequence. Energy built up in the weapon systems, drawing power from the main reactor. The ship shook slightly from the stress. 5 minutes felt like 5 hours as Krell's ships continued to attack from all sides. Finally, Carl reported ready. Ryan gave the order to fire. 2 beams of pure energy shot out from the Titan's wrath. They were so bright, they hurt to look at. They crossed the distance to the command ship in less than a second and struck it directly. The Krell command ship exploded in a massive fireball that consumed dozens of nearby ships. Immediately, the Krell ships in that sector began acting strangely. They stopped moving in coordination. Some flew in circles, others bumped into each other. A few just drifted without doing anything. The connection to their leader had been severed. Nicole smiled for the first time since the battle started. It had worked. Ryan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but only a moment. They had 16 more command ships to destroy. Over the next several hours, the Titan's wrath executed a brutal campaign. They used the Ragnarok cannons when they could. Between cooldown periods, they relied on regular weapons and clever tactics. Eric flew the ship through asteroid fields and debris clouds, using cover to reduce incoming fire. Carl targeted Krell ships with surgical precision, making ammunition last as long as possible. In the Marine sections, Major Danny Walsh and his troops prepared for boarding attempts. The Krell tried 3 times to attach to the hull and cut their way inside. Each time the Marines were waiting, they set up kill zones in the corridors, using heavy weapons and explosives to stop the Krell before they could spread through the ship. The fighting was brutal and close, but the Marines held every time. Dr. Karen and her science team developed a computer virus that could disrupt Krell ship systems. They loaded it into special missiles and fired them at command ships. The virus interfered with the biological nervous systems of the Krell vessels, making them easier to destroy. The civilian contractors on board, engineers and technicians who were not military, worked miracles keeping damaged systems running. When a railgun jammed, they fixed it in minutes. When a shield generator overloaded, they rerouted power before the section failed. Everyone on the ship contributed in their own way. Days passed. The battle became a test of endurance. The crew worked in shifts, grabbing sleep when they could. The ship took damage but kept fighting. Supplies ran low but held out. And one by one, the Krell command ships died. When the 17th and final command ship exploded, something unexpected happened. The remaining Krell ships, thousands of them, suddenly broke formation. They scattered in all directions, fleeing into deep space. The coordinated swarm became a panicked mob running away. The battle was over. The Titan's wrath had won. Silence filled the bridge of the Titan's wrath. The crew sat at their stations, too exhausted to celebrate. They had been fighting for 6 days straight, taking short breaks to sleep and eat but never fully resting. Now that the battle was over, the adrenaline drained away and left only fatigue. Ryan looked at the damage reports scrolling across his screens. The ship had taken a beating. Hull breaches on multiple decks. 2 railguns destroyed. 1 plasma cannon offline. Shields at 20% capacity. 47 crew members injured, 12 seriously. 3 dead. Ryan felt the weight of those 3 deaths. He knew their names: Lieutenant Marcus Cole, Ensign Beth Harper, and Private James Young. They had given their lives to save people they had never met, on a world they had never seen. But they had succeeded. The Krell were gone. The Valorian system was safe. Ryan stood from his chair, his legs stiff from sitting too long. He told Nicole to begin recovery operations. They needed to repair the ship, tend to the wounded, and help the Valorians however they could. A transmission came through from Valoria Prime. Commander Thelvar appeared on the screen, and his appearance had changed dramatically. His skin glowed bright gold, pulsing with energy. The translation computer identified gold as the Valorian color for pure joy and celebration. Thelvar's eyes were wet with tears. He spoke in a voice filled with emotion. On behalf of the Valorian people, he offered the deepest gratitude possible. The humans had saved them when all hope was lost. 2 million Valorians were alive because 1 human ship refused to give up. How could they ever repay such a debt? Ryan felt uncomfortable with the praise. He had just been doing his job, doing what was right. He told Thelvar that no repayment was necessary. The Valorians had already given Earth something valuable by showing them they were not alone in the galaxy. Sometimes the right thing to do was also the hard thing, and Earth was learning that lesson. Ryan offered to help the Valorians rebuild. In exchange, maybe the Valorians could teach humans about the galaxy they were still learning to navigate. Thelvar's skin shifted to a soft violet color, which meant profound respect and friendship. He said that Earth had announced itself to the galaxy in a way that would never be forgotten. The Valorian coalition would be honored to call humanity their allies. He promised that Valorian technology, knowledge, and resources would be shared with Earth. The 2 civilizations would grow stronger together. Over the following weeks, the Titan's wrath remained in the Valorian system. Repair crews worked on the ship while others helped Valorian survivors return to the surface of their world. The damage was terrible. Cities had been destroyed, forests burned, oceans polluted, but the planet was still alive and life could return. Human engineers worked alongside Valorian technicians. They shared ideas and learned from each other. The Valorians had better energy systems and medical technology. The humans had better weapons and more aggressive tactical thinking. Both sides recognized they could learn from the other. Dr. Karen spent hours talking with Valorian scientists. They discussed the Krell and where they might have come from. The Valorians had encountered the swarm before, centuries ago, but never in such numbers. They believed the Krell came from dark space, the empty regions between galaxies. The swarm traveled from system to system, consuming resources and moving on. They were like locusts, destroying everything and leaving dead worlds behind. Karen warned that the Krell might return someday. The ones that fled would remember what happened here. They might bring more ships next time or develop new weapons. Earth needed to prepare. The Valorians agreed. Together, they would establish early warning systems and share intelligence about Krell movements. Major Danny and his Marines helped train Valorian security forces in ground combat. The Valorians were skilled with technology, but less experienced with physical fighting. The Marines taught them tactics for defending buildings and cities against boarding actions. The Valorians taught the Marines about alien biology and how to fight enemies that did not think like humans. After a month, the Titan's wrath was ready to return home. The ship had been repaired as much as possible with the resources available. The rest would be completed back at Earth. Ryan stood on the bridge one last time before departure and looked at Valoria Prime on the view screen. The planet was healing. Smoke still rose from some areas, but green was returning to the continents. Life was stubborn. It found a way to continue. Thelvar sent a final message. He thanked Ryan and his crew again. He promised that the story of the Titan's wrath would be told to every Valorian child for generations. Earth would always have friends among the Valorian people. If humans ever needed help, the Valorians would come no matter the cost. Ryan transmitted his own message back to Earth before jumping to hyperspace. He reported the mission successful. The Valorians were saved. Earth had made its first true allies in the galaxy, but the universe was more dangerous than they had thought. There were threats out there, terrible things that destroyed worlds. Humanity needed to be ready. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. The Titan's wrath jumped to hyperspace and began the journey home. The crew finally had time to rest properly. People slept for long hours, recovering from the stress and exhaustion. Others gathered in the cafeteria to share stories about the battle. Friendships had been forged in combat, bonds that would last a lifetime. When the ship emerged from hyperspace near Earth 6 days later, they found a surprise waiting. Dozens of ships surrounded them, both military and civilian. News of their victory had reached home ahead of them. Earth wanted to celebrate its heroes. Ryan stood on the bridge and looked at his home planet with new eyes. Earth seemed smaller now, more fragile. He had seen what could happen to worlds when threats like the Krell came. Humanity was lucky. They had time to prepare. They had allies now. They had proven themselves capable of standing against overwhelming odds. But Ryan knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was huge and full of mysteries. There would be other threats, other challenges. Earth would face them all. And when the call for help came again, humanity would answer. Because that was what made humans special in the galaxy, not their weapons or their ships or their technology. It was their willingness to help others, even strangers, even when it was dangerous. It was their refusal to give up when things looked impossible. It was their belief that doing the right thing mattered, no matter the cost. The Titan's wrath docked at the orbital station above Earth. The crew prepared to disembark and reunite with their families. But they all knew they would fly together again. The galaxy needed protectors, and Earth had just shown it was ready for that role. The story of the Battle of Valoria Prime spread across Earth and beyond. Other alien civilizations heard about the young species that saved the Valorians. They heard about one ship holding off an entire swarm. They heard about humans who traveled across the stars to help people they had never met. And the galaxy remembered.